everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today, we're going to be doing an honest to goodness BDSM advice video. We are not going to be talking about world events or viral moments or Twitter hot takes. We're just going to be talking about some kink stuff. And I'm very excited to talk about this because this is a subject I cannot believe I haven't done as like a standalone video before. We are going to be discussing the top 10 mistakes I see new subs making. And we're also going to be talking about how to avoid them. And though this is technically aimed at submissives, this will also apply in a lot of ways to masochists, to bottoms of really any type. And doms, you should probably watch this too so you can learn what signs to look for and maybe help out a partner if you have a newer submissive on your hands. So without further ado, let's get into it. The number one thing that I see new subs doing, not necessarily in terms of order of commonality, but just the order of this list I made, the number one thing that I see is new submissives that do not understand the difference between fantasy and reality, and then they end up being really disappointed because of that. You know, think about it. Kink is not something that you're really presented with in a meaningful way in everyday life, right? It's not something you interact with on the street. Usually, you know, you're not seeing it in magazines or whatever, you know, interview from like a real masochist or something. You're seeing it through fantasy content. You're seeing it in fan fiction, in prawn, in novels, and, you know, movies like Secretary, 50 Shades of Grey, Love and Leashes. And though those movies are varying levels of realistic and of quality in general, for the most part, no matter what you're going for, you're not really getting a realistic sense of what everyday kink is like. You're getting this very grandiose view. Usually there's a lot of like mind reading involved. You know, there's a lot of like, oh my gosh, this is like the one true dom for me. And he like magically, telepathically knows like exactly what I want and, you know, dominates me in exactly the way that I want. And it's so amazing. And I thought I'd never feel this way. Like here I am being swept off my feet. You know, it's very classic Prince Charming stuff in a lot of ways. And so when you go into kink with all these fantasies, even if you haven't read anything external, I know for me, I was not one of those people, and I just had my own fantasies in my head. And when I got into the kink community, I realized what a small percentage of that fantasy could really meaningfully translate into a kink scene. The classic one I think of is like damsel in distress, you know, tied up in a fortress by some ne'er-do-well, and you're like, please, no, stop, don't. You're chained to like a medieval torture device, and you can't really do that in everyday kink. It's a lot more just mild-mannered than that, I guess I would say. And the solution to this, I think, is when you're going into the kink scene, you have to be able to set aside what your fantasy expectations tell you. Like if you think you're going to walk into a dungeon and it's going to be, you know, hundreds of beautiful people participating in a masquerade and like beautiful, expensive lingerie, and like it's gonna be like basically a really big fancy party, or like everyone's gonna be, you know, super attractive doing all these really, really intense scenes. Like, you know, set that aside. That's not probably gonna happen. What's probably gonna happen is you're gonna have a lot of like very average people doing a lot of very average things, and some of it's going to be exciting, and some of it you're going to find probably pretty boring. But I think the way that we combat having these fantasies overtake our expectations and causing a lot of disappointment is to, one, go in, not really have any expectations, just going in to like meet people, have fun, see what your local scene is like, maybe read on FetLife about some people's scenes, look at some photos, like go for that more than anything else. And then educate yourself, read more about what people are saying the scene is like, you know, read people's memoirs or stories from books about kink that are educational. That'll give you a better sense of what to actually expect. An older book I really like for this that I think is possibly out of print, but if you can find it, it's still good, is called Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. That's a good one. There's many others as well. There's another book That's called Conquer Me by Casey Cunningham. I really recommend to new subs, but setting up realistic expectations, that's going to be key. Because if you're just disappointed and you have really high expectations, like it's going to be hard to get fully into kink and like be able to see it for what it truly is, more or less. But moving on, number 2 is when people believe they have to be one thing and just stick to it. And this works in multiple different directions. So on one level, and this is especially my experience coming from the pet play world, a lot of people still this day believe that if you're if you're a pet, like you have to just be that. And it's like not even just a pet, but you have to be like a specific kind of pet. Like you have to be a puppy, a kitten, a pony. If you're a little, you have to be like one particular flavor of little. Like you can't be multiple things at once. And people feel, I think, very constrained by that and very pressured to like pick the right one out of the gate. And here's the deal. There's a lot of stuff you can do in kink, literally hundreds of different kinks, role play scenarios, relationship styles. Chances are, if you're picking something in your head before you even get into the scene and know anything about it, it's probably not going to be the thing you are long-term exclusively, and you might actually be missing out on a lot of potentially formative kink experiences because you're saying, well, no, I can't do that because like I'm only this kind of thing. And you just dismiss things out of hand because you're so overly concerned about just like staying in your box of like, well, but I chose to be a puppy and so this is what puppies do. And puppies can't also be littles and service subs and Victorian housemaids and blah, blah, blah. Like you have to just be that one thing. And like, reality, as you get into the kink scene, you will discover even submissives very likely have multiple different styles of submission. They may submit different ways to different dominants, and they may also just bottom. They may also be masochists. They may also even be switches. They may actually even top themselves. They may even maybe dom other people. Like, there's a wide world of kink out there, so don't feel pressure. Like you have to pick one thing out of the gate or ever and just be that. As you get more experience, as you meet more people, even if you're someone who kind of just focuses on one kink role at a time, you don't really like play with multiple different styles at once, you'll likely find that with different partners, different aspects of your kink identity will come out. Like you may feel more like a puppy with one person, but then the energy with somebody else is totally different, and maybe you feel more like a kitten or a pony, or you feel like more of a brat, or you feel like more of a little. That's all totally valid and fine. So I think the solution for this is really easy. It kind of goes back again to not really having any set expectations, but moreover, being open to authentic experiences and not pigeonholing yourself and just having an open mind going into things about like, this is what I feel like right now, and that's valid and that can be very true, but I'm also going to be open to other possibilities and just learn and listen and try to stay aware what's happening in my own brain and my own body so I'm able to take advantage of opportunities when they arise and not say no to them because I have some set idea of like what a particular kind of submissive or bottom has to be or what they have to look like. Now, closely related to this is number 3, which is putting on an act of what a person thinks a good submissive has to look like. This is also very tied into like fantasy expectations because again, if you're coming from a pure fantasy background, fan fiction, movies, novels, whatever, doesn't matter, you're probably going to have some stereotypes in your head. Even if you do some Google research, because Google especially these days is not very good, you are likely to run into articles that have very prescriptive terms of like, this is what a good sub does. Like, good submissives don't make eye contact, and they're nude all the time, and they kneel, and they always use titles, and they're able to take such a level of pain. And the reality is, submission is going to be different for everyone. Everyone's going to have their own different style, and I think it's very constraining and unfortunate that a lot of our earlier preserved writings about submission involve this like very harsh kind of like list of like a true submissive does this and asks this. And like I think there was a good intention there of trying to help people figure out like what does it even mean to be submissive? What does the submissive do? And that's gone past that into being a like checklist or a set of requirements you have to follow. It's not like that at all. Some people I think actually they get into kink and they think, well, to be a good a good submissive, I need to keep my eyes downcast and I need to master all these poses and be really still and not speak unless spoken to and be really meek and be kind of a doormat and so on and so forth. Just be very like small and not take up too much space. That's not going to work for a lot of people because of their everyday personalities and what they take into kink from that. And also just like somebody's style of submission too. Like it's okay to be a submissive who is authoritative in the sense that like they speak their own mind, they have thoughts, they have opinions about things, they're not afraid to make eye contact, they're allowed to sit on furniture. Like you get to make the rules with your dominant partner about what submission looks like to you. And if that happens to not include eye contact restriction or having to kneel instead of sit, like you get to decide that. Don't let anyone tell you that like, well, but if you are real submissive, you would do like whatever thing here, because it's so variable. The only thing that submission really has to be about at the end of the day is giving up power and or authority to someone else. Just keep that in mind. I think for this, the solution to this is to think critically whenever somebody tells you basically anything that starts with like a submissive always blank. If whatever it is, if there's always in there and it's not about like, you must always have consent, you can just discount it out of hand. So don't fall for the easy path that like a checklist gives you of like, here's how to be the perfect submissive. Because like that's not going to be the case. Because a lot of doms also want different things than those lists will tell you they want. So like, don't get too wrapped up in that is more or less what I would say. Now, this is a little bit of a heavier one, but it is very necessary to talk about. And that is assuming more time being in the scene or having greater presence in a local community means that someone is a safe or even a safer player. If you run into a guy in a dungeon and they've been bragging, they've been doing rope for 15 years and they run this and that party and they've, gotten a lot of notoriety on FetLife or whatever, that means they're a safe player because look how many people know them. Look how many friends they have. Look at how important they are in the community. Like, that does not actually mean that they are a safe person at all. In fact, I would argue, especially if you're like brand new and you're getting into the scene for the first time, a lot of the people that come up to you and immediately start bragging about like, well, but I've been doing this for a decade and I'm like the best whip thrower in the entire Midwest. That sounds like a cowboy thing, I guess, but it's the example I'm gonna go with that. So you have people that come up and they like immediately start like talking about almost like they're giving you a resume of like how experienced they are, how domly they are, all the things that they and their submissives do to like try and like lure you into a relationship and like bragging about their experience level. And the reality is somebody can be dangerous oftentimes in different ways if they're also brand new because they don't really have experience doing kink. And that can present its own problems. But people who are very experienced in kink, even if they seem to have a good reputation locally from what you can tell, people are friendly with them, they go to a lot of events openly, they can still be dangerous and they can still be hiding problematic behavior. So if anyone comes up to you and is like pressuring you and like starts sort of presenting like I am advertising myself as a potential dom and like I'm so experienced, look at all these subs I've trained and I can help you learn how to be a submissive. Like this is, to be honest, very much based in my own experience being a brand new submissive, where when I came into the scene in person at an event, I had someone come up to me and they just started like talking to me about how, well, a real dom will be able to like teach you how to be a submissive and like what kind of submissive you are, blah, blah, blah. And I instinctively was like, that seems a little bit weird. So I did not go with that person. Turns out I had a correct instinct on that one. And ever since then, I have learned the importance of trusting your gut. So I advise if you get bad vibes from someone, listen to that, even if it's really small. If you are feeling like this seems like they're coming on pretty strong and I don't really like that, and you're weighing that against, but look how experienced they are, look at all the things they can do. Listen to that part that's like, that doesn't necessarily feel so great. And take your time. Be patient. Don't rush into things. Allow them to prove to you that not only do they actually like have a certain number of years doing kink, but like how do they practice negotiations? How do they practice consent? watch them do other scenes. Really just take your time getting to know a person and not just like rush in to do a scene with somebody because like look how awesome they are. This is also why making community connections is so important, especially for submissives, because when you are meeting people, not just to play with them, not just because you're seeking a dom, you will learn from other subs about like, oh, well, that guy has this reputation, or that person is actually known for this habit of like pursuing brand new submissives. And then after a year, they like replace them with somebody else. Like you'll learn that, maybe not immediately getting into a dungeon for the first time, but as you get to make friends in the community, as you make more connections, you will learn that kind of thing, and that can actually really help you stay safe. And it also ward off a lot of the people that are the worst bad actors, because they tend to not go after as many people that they know are well connected and have a support network, because like they're trying to go after people that they know explicitly do not have that a lot of the time. But moving on, this is going to be more about things that people say that they think will like make them seem more appealing to potential dominants, to potential partners. And this is thinking that having no limits makes you more desirable as a submissive. And there is a little bit of truth in this, I'm not going to lie. In the sense that presenting yourself as somebody who has no limits and is down for whatever will put out a giant beacon to a lot of the very worst people who are looking for somebody like that. Because again, there are so many kinks you can do. Hundreds of kinks, hundreds of roleplay scenarios, hundreds of options. And if you are getting into the scene and you haven't really done anything before and you think you know what kink is, you might be inclined to think, well, everything I've read in a book or everything that I've seen online, all that sounds really fun to me in theory. You don't necessarily actually have a good, robust sense of what your limits are. Because if your fantasy landscape is like, I want two people to like flog me at the same time, and like it's going to be this transcendental experience, whatever, actually having done a flogging before, you don't really know yet where your limitations are because you haven't done anything. Instead, what I recommend is very intentionally, again, taking things slowly, sampling one kink at a time, really taking your time to process that, and stay at first in the most comfortable area, right? The least risky area, so like sensation play, maybe some sensory deprivation, maybe some light role play, see how that feels, keep expanding and expanding, expanding, just checking, seeing how you're feeling, see if it matched your expectations of what you thought it was going to be like. Instead of saying, I just have no limits out of the gate, start from like, I am figuring out where my comfort level is. I'm figuring out what my genuine desires look like. And I'm here for now. We might get to here, but for right now, we're going to be here. So that's what I would do, is just like, don't make any promises about where your limits are going to be. Allow that to be something that you discover naturally, and have just a really honest dialogue with yourself about, because it's not shameful to have limits. Pretty much everyone actually has limits when you stop to think about it, but very few people will actually be genuinely like no limits people. I've met like one or two masochists before who genuinely have no limits, but it's probably not going to be you. Sad to say. But in any case, the next one that I want to talk about is actually also very related to this one. I see a similar mentality behind it, which is being afraid to safe word / really being afraid to disappoint a partner. So let's say you've been in the scene for a minute, you found a dom, you're like getting started doing some scenes, it's super duper exciting, ooh, it's so amazing. And then something happens in a scene and you're like, whoa, that is not what I expect. This is not really what I want. Maybe let's say it's not even like a big like issue with like a consent violation or anything. It's just like they hit you in a way. Maybe they miss something and they end up slapping you somewhere like really, really sensitive. Let's just keep it sort of PG-13 for YouTube. And you're like, whoa, that's like way intense. It knocks you out of your like happy headspace and you're feeling really distressed and you need to stop the scene because it's no longer a fun time for you. In that scenario, a lot of people are going to be like, well, do I really need to safe word? Is it that big of a deal? I can keep going. I can press through. Like, I'm not having fun, but I don't really want to disappoint my dom, so I'm going to make myself keep doing this scene. As a really bad setup for the rest of your kink experience to have. Safe wording should be something that you are basically like practicing how to do. If you get into the habit of not using your safe word because you feel shame about it and you're reinforcing that, it's going to be harder and harder to do it when you do actually need to do it because you don't have any practice doing it and you have all that built up expectation of like, I'm not the kind of submissive who has to safe word. And I find a lot of people take pride in not being subs who safe word often because it's like, I'm big and I'm tough and I can do scenes that no one else can do and I can submit in ways that nobody else can. And like, is that going to technically impress people? Yeah, it's going to impress some people, but I don't think it does that for the right reasons. I think it's way more important that you are developing positive responses to kink. You're having the mental experiences you want to have. You're staying in a place where you feel emotionally safe with your partner, and you're pursuing things not just to push through for the sake of your dominant partner, but are also because they're things you want to do. And there is a time and place for like, navigating boundary pushing with a trusted dominant partner as a submissive. There's a time and place for that. Again, not when you're brand new. Sorry, you gotta wait for that one. So I think really, if you want to avoid this, I think it comes down to like practicing saying a safe word. Like literally in a mirror, say it to yourself. Have practice sessions with your partner where like you get on a piece of furniture and then you just like practice saying the word. Or you like hop over the edge of the bed and then like before they even touch you at all, you just like say red and you practice stopping the scene and you debrief and you talk about it. Just make it really normalized, make it an easy thing to do, and hopefully you will find if you suggest this, you'll have a partner who is supportive and wants you to be able to do this. So that is where we go with that. I think safe words are so important, and I think we should not feel shame about using them at all, and it's really unfortunate that so many people do. This next one is a big one. Also probably a little controversial, but I do think it is true enough to talk about it, and that is people believing that being a submissive will fix their life or fix their relationship. I go back to the movie Secretary. The story in that, not to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, there's a major plot point that revolves around one of the main characters hurting themselves, and their dominant partner basically like literally talks them out of it, and like it's sort of a, oh, well, you could dom me so hard that I stopped this like really negative coping skill that I was using that was not actually beneficial to me. And I think some people over the years have gotten the impression that that's like possible, and that even the role of dominance is to fix you and is sort of almost a replacement for therapy or internal work or medication or things like that. And that's not true. You cannot dom someone out of life issues if somebody is genuinely really struggling. Like if you are struggling with basic emotional regulation, if you're struggling with like mental health issues, it might seem like a good option to be like, oh, I want to have a dom run my life and tell me what to do and tell me how to do it and just plan my life for me, because that would be so much easier having to deal with all the exhaustion I feel every day with like having to think about what I'm having for every meal and like getting ready for work and like not having the motivation I want to have to be able to do the things that I want to do with my life. And if you're in a place where you are dealing with, I would say, like, you're really struggling with, again, trying to keep things PG-13 for YouTube, if you are struggling with, like, really pronounced negative coping mechanisms that you know are not healthy for you, if you are struggling with severe, like, mental illness issues that are not being properly addressed with therapy, counseling, medication, things like that, if you feel like you're in a really negative place where you are treating getting into DS as a solution for all of your problems as opposed to like a healthy additive thing for your life, I recommend doing some more work on the life part first so you can be ready to get into a healthy kink relationship. I also see people use kink as a way to like try and solve a relationship that maybe is on the rocks and like is not super compatible. A lot of people think, okay, well, we fight a lot and we have arguments and we don't see eye to eye, so if I just give up my ability to have a say in things and I give all my authority and all my power to a partner, they are going to be able to call the shots and then we're just going to be really content with that. I find that doesn't really work. It tends to lead to a simmering resentment that builds up over time instead of like actually fixing the underlying issues. I don't recommend getting into a kink relationship with somebody that you have a high conflict relationship with. If you're always arguing, if you have trouble communicating, if tensions flare up a lot, if like you talk about something and then like 9 times out of 10, one person stomps off, the other one ends up crying on the floor. Like that's not ideal conditions for getting into kink because you're gonna be playing with much more intense things. And it's not actually as simple as just like, fine, you make all the decisions. Like if that's your mentality is like, fine, I'm gonna put you in charge, see how you like it. Like that's not a healthy way to get into kink. I think the key here is going to be doing that internal work, trying to get to a healthier baseline. Look up the window of tolerance. If you recognize you've been operating way outside your window of tolerance for a long time, that's going to be something you're going to want to work on before you get into a DS relationship or really doing any kind of BDSM. And another thing that I see a lot of submissives do that I think also comes from that mentality of like, fine, you make all the decisions, is submissives will tend to have a habit, especially when they're new, of putting all of the pressure of like negotiation and scene creation onto the dominant partner, where it's like, okay, they're going to come to me with all the questions. They're going to have all the checklists. They're going to have all the like negotiation forms. They're going to have all of the say in like designing the scene. I just have to show up and be like, I want you to spank me. And then they're going to figure out the rest. And that's like their job. And some doms like that. Some doms, especially if you're more willing to let them be creative with how things go, they are happy to like be the one to do all the scene creation and like take charge with that. But I think again, to get into the habit of doing that, to have the default be like, all right, I'm just gonna sit back and let the scene happen, not really try to like put my own flavor into that scene of what I want to see happen. I'm just gonna hope and pray that somehow telepathically they will know what I want to see in a scene and that they will know the level of spanking I want and the emotional experience I want to have and if I want to cry or not and what kind of aftercare I want to have and like what that looks like. Like they're gonna somehow know all of that. And if they don't ask the right questions, it's on them for not asking. And I'm sorry, subs, even though you are submissive, it is still your responsibility to come to the table, knowing what kind of questions you want to ask, and then asking them. Like, if you want aftercare, you have to ask for it. If you want something particular done during the scene, you have to ask for it. If you want certain boundaries to be in place, you need to make sure that gets spoken about. If you are just passively letting a negotiation happen, and it's not really a negotiation at that point, because you're just sort of like answering quiz questions, you're not actually, like, negotiation implies a back and forth by the very word itself. So if you're not actually doing a back and forth, you're just like saying, yep, 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 just like doing the bare minimum. And this not only puts a lot of pressure onto DOMs that a lot of them do not want to have, it also takes away your own ability to create the kinds of scenes you want to have. Like, that is your opportunity. Like, if you're a submissive and you are not performing the actions of the scene, the negotiation is your chance to really put your spin on what you want to have happen, to really make sure you are advocating for getting to do what you really want to do. Like, a spanking could go a million different ways. And if you don't say, I want to do a schoolgirl OTK spanking, and then your partner does like a cowgirl and like cowboy, like Western spanking thing for some reason, like you're gonna end up being like, oh, I'm disappointed. It wasn't really what I thought it would be. Well, you had the opportunity to say something in advance, so say it. And it was really hard for subs to feel that agency in themselves to be able to speak up during a negotiation. So I think preparing questions ahead of time, really reflecting on what you want first, and writing it down on a list, I think will make it a lot easier for people if you feel nervous in the moment talking about this and asserting yourself. Setting yourself up in advance by doing the hard work without having it to be like in person, face to face with somebody will do a lot of the work for you, and it'll make it a lot easier to actually say what you want to have happen. Next up is another belief, and this is the belief that dominants are all these infallible, steady rocks who never make mistakes and never have hard feelings. Basically, seeing doms as superhuman. And that's a nice fantasy to have. It's nice to have the illusion from time to time that your dom is like this perfect being that can do no wrong and like is this solid rock. But that's not actual reality. They're actually human, spoiler alert, and they have feelings, and they have bad days, and they have hard weeks at work, and they can go through grief, and they can have mental health issues, and they can have triggers, and they can have all kinds of things going on in their lives that are not even necessarily about you, but are things that affect them and affect their dominance. And I think submissives actually oftentimes can put dominance in this really precarious position where, in order to maintain the fantasy and the illusion of the DS, a dom feels like they have to not really share their full selves with their submissive because they're afraid of breaking that spell. I find that to be especially true with female dominants, with male submissive partners, where a lot of male subs, because of the fantasy background they come from, have these like very rigid expectations of like what a female dominant looks like. And like, heaven forbid she have a moment of like weakness or like crying about something that made her really sensitive, and that the vulnerability is oftentimes not respected. Also, same thing is true for male dominance as well, but I find particularly male submissives seem to be less forgiving of this for some reason. I think it's good to just remind yourself that your dom's gonna have human moments, and that vulnerability they give you when they're showing their honest selves, when they're letting you see them cry, when they're letting you like know a little bit about their inner world, and if it's not going well, like that is such an honor. That is such a beautiful thing that they probably don't share with a lot of other people. They are actually giving you the privilege as a submissive to come into their little inner garden. And that should be as much of a privilege to you, I think, as like the privilege you have to serve them physically, to take off their boots, to get them a drink, to be the one who takes pain from them. That is another kind of privilege they are giving you. And I think if we want our dominants to respect us and our emotions and our bad mental health days and our struggles, like we need to give them the same in return. That's really, I think, the bare minimum we can do is like respect the humanity of the people that we're playing with. So I recommend trying to have a little bit of a mentality shift on like going from my dom has to be this perfect being who will make no mistakes to accepting the reality that your dominant partner will make mistakes. They will say things that hurt you. They will do things wrong. They will not always be skilled at everything. They will have their own tough moments. And that's okay. And that actually adds to the flavor of your relationship, that adds to the depth of it. And that's actually kind of vulnerability that is so special between a dominant and a submissive. And it should be cradled tenderly as opposed to thrown in the trash. That is my honest opinion about that. Now, finally, this is going to be a big one. This is like, please listen to this one. Subs, please stop treating the collar as the be-all end-all. I see a lot of people do this. It's very similar to how a lot of vanilla people chase being married. And it's almost like it doesn't matter to who, or if they're a good match, it's just like, I need to get that ring on a finger pronto because I'm embarrassed about not being married yet. And like my family's like telling me I should be married, and like, where's the grandkids? And like, it's tough, okay? I get it. There's pressure from a lot of different directions. Same like in kink, there's a lot of pressure from people to like be collared and get to that level because it's seen as a mark of what a true submissive will look like. Like the pinnacle of submission is to get a collar, and that's validating in a way, and it affirms your like level of submission. But you don't have to wear a collar. Even if you are in a place in a relationship where collaring might make sense, with that high level of commitment, you don't actually have to wear one. It's totally optional. And I think if instead of chasing an object, I find in general, I actually didn't include this on the list, but it is a thought. A lot of subs, a lot of people in kink in general, are very gear focused. They're very focused on the consumption of it, of like, I need to have all these fancy collars. I need to have all these like expensive role play outfits and latex and all these toys. And like, they want to focus on all the accoutrements, but they don't actually seem to care as much about like having really good scene experiences. They want to consume things conspicuously in a way that gets other people's attention to give other people a certain impression about who they are as kinksters, because having these expensive toys means I'm a serious kinkster, and being the kind of person who is collared means that I'm this level of submissive. Doesn't necessarily mean that at all, but it's about the impression. It's about what other people think about you more so than your own experience. And also, chasing collars can be about like validating something internal. Like, I get to the point where I can be collared, everything will be in place. Everything will be right. I will be the pinnacle of submission. I will have achieved my goal, and all will be right with the world. And just like with getting married, getting collared probably isn't really going to change anything. It's going to be more of the same. And if you're not in a good place where you think this is the partner that you want to be with really long term, and you want to wear their collar all the time, and like everything just feels right, like if everything doesn't feel right, like don't go after it. Like, it's okay to take your time and to be slow and to realize that collars are optional. You don't have to have them. I think that's so important to know getting into this, because like if you just want to wear a collar for fashion reasons, you can do that. If you want to wear it for practical bondage purposes, do that. If you want to do it as like a, on the weekend temporarily for a high protocol thing, that's okay too. Like, just be honest about what you're actually seeing in the collar. And is it about getting to a level of like trust and comfort and feeling secure with the partner you're going after, and getting a collar is just incidental to that? Or is it like the collar is like the thing, and I really like, I'm not even picturing what the rest of the relationship looks like. It's just about the collar itself. Like, be careful with that. Be careful with that mentality. I think just realize that, like, especially once you get to a collar, it's probably not going to fix underlying issues. It's probably not going to really change a whole lot about your relationship. And a lot of people who are very dedicated submissives never need one, never wear one. It's an optional thing. And that's also valid. It's okay. There's so many different ways of being a submissive. And yeah, that's about what I wanted to say on this for the top 10 things I see newbie subs doing that can mislead them, but also solutions for how to not do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this one in a comment down below. Are you a new submissive? Does this help you? Are you an experienced submissive? Did you think of anything that I did not put on this list? I'd love to hear all your thoughts and feelings on a comment down below. If you would like to, if not already, please go ahead and subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all different kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best you can do that is with Patreon. Link to that will be down below. If you do or any support over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.